What happens when the Queen of Pop meets late-night television's most unpredictable host? And a simple interview question ignites a battle of egos that spirals completely out of control. Tonight, we're diving into one of the most explosive celebrity meltdowns ever captured on live television, where Madonna's legendary temper collided head-on with Jimmy Kimmel's razor-sharp wit, creating a train wreck that had producers scrambling and audiences gasping. If you want to see how a routine promotional interview turned into career-defining chaos, make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story gets wilder with every passing second. The studio lights were blazing hot as Madonna settled into the guest chair, her platinum blonde hair catching the glare as she adjusted her leather jacket with practiced precision. Jimmy Kimmel, wearing his trademark grin, shuffled his note cards and leaned back in his chair, ready to dive into what should have been a standard promotional interview for her upcoming tour. "So Madonna," Jimmy began, his voice carrying that familiar late-night cadence. "You've been in the music industry for over 4 decades now, and I have to ask, at what point do you think an artist should consider, gracefully stepping back and letting the next generation take the spotlight?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Madonna's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, but her eyes sharpened with the intensity of a predator sensing a threat. She tilted her head slightly, her voice dropping to a dangerously low register. "Excuse me, Jimmy, but are you suggesting that I'm too old to be relevant in my own industry?" Jimmy's grin widened, clearly enjoying the shift in energy. "Oh no, not at all. I'm just saying that, some artists know when to bow out gracefully. Look at someone like Cher. She's been doing farewell tours for 20 years now." "Cher is still performing, you absolute moron," Madonna shot back, her composure cracking like ice under pressure. "And comparing me to anyone else shows exactly how little you understand about what I've built in this industry." The audience stirred uncomfortably, sensing the tension crackling between host and guest. Jimmy leaned forward, his journalist instincts kicking in as he smelled blood in the water. "Well, I mean, your last album didn't exactly set the charts on fire, did it? I'm just wondering if maybe the audience has moved on to, artists who are more in touch with contemporary culture." Madonna's laugh was sharp and bitter, cutting through the studio like a blade. "Contemporary culture? You mean the culture that exists because I created it? The culture that wouldn't exist without me pushing boundaries while everyone else was playing it safe?" "I think you might be giving yourself a little too much credit there," Jimmy replied, his tone casual but his eyes gleaming with mischief. "I mean, there were plenty of artists breaking barriers before you came along." "Name one," Madonna challenged, her voice rising with each word. "Name one female artist who was doing what I was doing in the 80s. Name one artist who was combining sexuality, spirituality, and social commentary the way I was." "Go ahead, I'll wait." Jimmy paused, clearly relishing the moment. "Well, there was Cyndi Lauper. She was pretty groundbreaking." "Cyndi Lauper?" Madonna's voice cracked with disbelief. "Are you seriously comparing Cyndi Lauper to me right now? She had a couple of hits, and then disappeared into Broadway obscurity. I've been reinventing myself and the entire concept of pop stardom for 4 decades. Okay, but let's be honest here," Jimmy pressed on, his voice taking on a more aggressive edge. "Your last few albums have been met with pretty lukewarm reception from critics and fans alike. Don't you think that's maybe a sign that it's time to focus on other projects?" Madonna stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor with a harsh screech that made the audience wince. "Other projects? You think I should retire because a bunch of 20-something critics who weren't even born when I was changing the world don't understand my artistic evolution?" "I'm not saying retire," Jimmy said, trying to maintain his composure as Madonna towered over him. "I'm just saying maybe it's time to accept that your prime years are behind you." "My prime years?" Madonna's voice climbed to a near shriek. "My prime years are behind me? I'm selling out arenas around the world. I'm still pushing boundaries that other artists are afraid to even approach. And you have the audacity to sit there in your little late-night bubble and tell me that my prime is over? The camera operators were frantically adjusting their angles, trying to capture every moment of the unfolding drama. Jimmy, to his credit, remained seated, but his knuckles were white as he gripped his note cards. Look, Madonna, I'm not trying to insult you here. I'm just asking the questions that I think a lot of people are wondering about. A lot of people? Madonna's voice dripped with contempt. You mean a lot of people like you, Jimmy? A lot of middle-aged men who never created anything original in their lives, but feel qualified to judge those of us who actually take risks? Hey now, that's not fair, Jimmy protested, his own temper starting to flare. I've been doing this show for years. I've interviewed thousands of guests, and I know talent when I see it. Talent? Madonna laughed harshly. You wouldn't recognize talent if it bit you on your smug little face. You're a talk show host, Jimmy. You read jokes that other people write for you and ask questions that your producers hand you on cards. Don't confuse that with actually creating something meaningful. The studio audience was dead silent now, watching the spectacle unfold with a mixture of fascination and horror. Jimmy's famous composure was beginning to crack, his face flushing red as Madonna's words hit their mark. At least I don't have to rely on shock value and controversy to stay relevant, Jimmy shot back, his voice tight with anger. At least I don't have to constantly reinvent myself because what I was doing before stopped working. Stopped working? Madonna's eyes blazed with fury. I've sold over 300 million records worldwide. I've had more #1 hits than any female artist in history. I've influenced every pop star who came after me. What exactly has stopped working, Jimmy? Your ability to connect with audiences under the age of 40, Jimmy replied coldly. Your ability to make music that matters to people who weren't alive during the Reagan administration. Madonna's face went pale with rage, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. You know what, Jimmy? You want to know what's really sad here? It's not that I'm supposedly past my prime. It's that you're so threatened by a woman who refuses to disappear quietly that you feel the need to tear her down on national television. Threatened? Jimmy scoffed. I'm not threatened by you, Madonna. I'm just calling it like I see it. No, you're not, Madonna said, her voice suddenly deadly calm. You're doing what men like you have always done when faced with a woman who won't be silenced. You're trying to diminish my achievements, question my relevance, and make me feel like I should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention you're willing to throw my way. Jimmy's face twisted with indignation as Madonna's words hung in the air like an accusation. He leaned forward in his chair, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that the microphones barely caught. Oh, so now this is about gender. Really, Madonna? You're going to play that card when you can't handle a few legitimate questions about your career trajectory? Legitimate questions? Madonna's voice rose to a pitch that made the sound engineers wince. You call asking me when I should step aside for the next generation a legitimate question? You call suggesting that my prime is over legitimate journalism? I call it honest, Jimmy replied, his own voice growing louder to match hers. I call it asking the hard questions that other interviewers are too starstruck or too scared to ask. Someone needs to hold you accountable for the decline in quality of your recent work. Madonna's eyes flashed with a fury so intense that several audience members actually leaned back in their seats. Decline in quality? My recent work is some of the most innovative music being made today. Just because it doesn't fit into your narrow definition of what pop music should sound like doesn't mean it's a decline. Innovative? Jimmy let out a harsh laugh. Madonna, your last album sounded like a desperate attempt to stay relevant by copying whatever's trending on social media. There's nothing innovative about a 60-year-old woman trying to sound like she's 25. There it is, Madonna said, pointing an accusatory finger at Jimmy's face. There's the real issue, isn't it? It's not about my music. It's not about my relevance. It's about my age. It's about the fact that you can't handle a woman who refuses to disappear when society tells her she's supposed to. Your age is relevant when you're trying to appeal to an audience that wasn't born when you were at your peak, Jimmy shot back, his professional demeanor completely abandoned now. It's relevant when you're wearing outfits that would be inappropriate on someone half your age. The studio fell into a stunned silence. Even the camera operators stopped moving, frozen by the sheer audacity of Jimmy's comment. Madonna's face went through a series of expressions, from shock to rage to something that looked almost like amusement. "Inappropriate outfits?" she said slowly, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. "Jimmy, are you really going to sit there and police what I wear? Are you going to tell me that there's an expiration date on a woman's right to express herself however she chooses?" "I'm saying there's a difference between expressing yourself and making people uncomfortable," Jimmy replied, clearly doubling down on his position. "I'm saying that maybe, just maybe, there comes a time when you should consider whether your choices are serving your art or just drawing attention for the wrong reasons." Madonna moved closer to Jimmy's desk, her heels clicking against the floor like gunshots. "Making people uncomfortable? Jimmy, I've been making people uncomfortable my entire career. That's what real artists do. We challenge people. We make them question their assumptions. We force them to confront their own biases and limitations. There's a difference between challenging people and shocking them just for the sake of it," Jimmy said, his voice steady despite Madonna's intimidating presence. "There's a difference between being an artist and being a spectacle." "A spectacle?" Madonna's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You know what's a spectacle, Jimmy? A middle-aged man who makes his living mocking celebrities and politicians, sitting in judgment of actual creators. You know what's a spectacle? A talk show host who thinks he has the right to determine when a woman's career should end." "I never said your career should end," Jimmy protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "I just think maybe it's time to evolve, to find new ways to contribute to the culture that don't involve trying to compete with artists who are literally decades younger than you." "Compete?" Madonna's voice rose to a near shriek. "You think I'm competing with 20-year-olds? Jimmy, I'm not competing with anyone. I'm in a league of my own. I'm operating on a level that these young artists can only dream of reaching." "Are you, though?" Jimmy asked, his voice suddenly quiet and deadly serious. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're desperately trying to recapture something that's already gone. It looks like you're chasing relevance instead of creating it." Madonna's face went pale, and for a moment the fight seemed to go out of her. But then her eyes hardened again, and she leaned across Jimmy's desk until their faces were inches apart. "You want to know what desperation looks like, Jimmy? Desperation is a man who's never created anything original in his life trying to tear down a woman who's changed the world. Desperation is hiding behind a desk and a team of writers because you don't have the courage to put yourself out there the way real artists do." "Real artists?" Jimmy's voice cracked with emotion. "Madonna, I've been entertaining people for decades. I've brought joy and laughter to millions of viewers. That's not real enough for you?" "Entertainment is not art, Jimmy," Madonna said coldly. "Making people laugh at other people's expense is not the same as creating something that challenges them, that changes them, that makes them see the world differently." "And what exactly are you changing with your latest album?" Jimmy demanded. "What minds are you opening with songs about partying and staying young forever?" "I'm changing the conversation about what it means to be a woman in this industry," Madonna replied fiercely. "I'm changing the expectations about what women can do, what they can say, what they can wear, and how long they can do it. Every time I step on stage, every time I release new music, I'm proving that women don't have to accept the limitations that society tries to impose on them." "But at what cost?" Jimmy asked, his voice softer now, but no less challenging. "At what cost to your credibility, to your legacy, to the respect that you've earned over the course of your career?" Madonna straightened up, her eyes blazing with renewed fury. "My legacy? My legacy is that I never let anyone, especially not men like you, Tell me what I could or couldn't do. My legacy is that I paved the way for every female artist who came after me to be bold, to be fearless, to be unapologetically themselves. Your legacy is also a string of increasingly desperate attempts to stay in the spotlight, Jimmy replied, his cruelty now fully unleashed. Your legacy is alienating your own fan base by refusing to accept that times have changed. Times have changed? Madonna's voice rose to a roar. Jimmy, I am the reason times have changed. I am the reason female artists today can be sexual, can be provocative, can be controversial without being destroyed by it. I am the reason the conversation about women in music is different now than it was when I started. And maybe that's enough, Jimmy said quietly. Maybe you've done your part, and now it's time to let others carry the torch. Madonna stared at him for a long moment, her chest rising and falling with the intensity of her breathing. When she spoke again, her voice was low and dangerous. Let others carry the torch? Jimmy, I am the torch. I am the fire that burns in every young woman who refuses to be silenced, who refuses to be diminished, who refuses to accept that her worth expires on her 30th birthday. Then why do you need to keep proving it? Jimmy asked, his question cutting through the tension like a knife. If you're so confident in your legacy, if you're so sure of your place in history, why do you need to keep fighting for relevance? Madonna's face went through a series of expressions, and for a moment, it looked like she might actually answer the question honestly. But then her mask slipped back into place, and her voice became cold and controlled. Because men like you will never stop trying to diminish women like me. Because every time we take our foot off the gas, every time we show even a moment of vulnerability, there's always someone ready to declare us finished. The tension in the studio had reached a breaking point, and Jimmy's question hung in the air like a challenge that neither of them could back down from. Madonna's eyes narrowed as she processed his words, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a venom that made the entire crew shift uncomfortably. You really want to know why I keep fighting, Jimmy? Because every single day, men like you wake up and decide that successful women need to be put in their place. Every single day there's another article, another interview, another smug host, who thinks he can determine when a woman's time is up. That's not what this is about, Jimmy protested, but his voice lacked the conviction it had carried earlier. This is about artistic integrity, about knowing when to gracefully transition to the next phase of your career. Gracefully transition? Madonna's laugh was harsh and grating. Jimmy, when was the last time you told a male artist to gracefully transition? When was the last time you suggested that Mick Jagger should step aside for younger rockers? When was the last time you questioned whether Paul McCartney should still be making music? Jimmy's face flushed red as he struggled to find a response. That's different, and you know it. Those artists aren't trying to appeal to teenage audiences with their music. Neither am I, Madonna shot back, her voice rising to a crescendo. I'm making music for my fans, for people who have grown with me, for people who understand that art doesn't have an expiration date. The fact that you can't comprehend that says more about your limitations than mine. Your fans? Jimmy's voice took on a mocking tone that made several audience members gasp audibly. Madonna, half of your fans are gay men living vicariously through your delusions of eternal youth, and the other half are women who are too polite to tell you that your recent music is embarrassing. The studio fell into a silence so complete that the hum of the air conditioning seemed deafening. Madonna's face went through a transformation that was almost frightening to witness, her features contorting with a rage so pure and intense that it seemed to radiate heat. Did you just, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, did you just mock my gay fans? Did you just reduce the people who have supported me through 4 decades of music to some kind of pathetic stereotype? Jimmy realized immediately that he had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. I'm not mocking anyone, I'm just pointing out that your core audience might not be the best judge of contemporary musical quality. contemporary musical quality? Madonna's voice exploded through the studio like a sonic boom. You ignorant, pathetic excuse for a human being. Those fans that you just mocked have been the backbone of the music industry for decades. They've supported artists when the rest of the world turned their backs. They've kept careers alive when the mainstream media tried to destroy them. Look, I didn't mean to offend anyone, Jimmy said, his voice cracking under the pressure. I was just trying to make a point about demographics and market appeal. Market appeal? Madonna stepped around the desk, moving closer to Jimmy's chair, with predatory grace. You think this is about market appeal? You think my relationship with my fans is some kind of business transaction that you can analyze and dismiss? Madonna, please sit down, Jimmy said, his voice betraying the first hint of real fear. Let's try to have a civilized conversation here. Civilized? Madonna's laugh was wild and unhinged. You want civilized? After you just insulted millions of people who have nothing but love and respect for art? After you reduced their devotion to some kind of joke? The show's producer was frantically gesturing from the sidelines, trying to get Jimmy's attention, but both host and guest were too locked in their battle to notice. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of the unfolding disaster. I think we should take a commercial break, Jimmy said, reaching for the card that would signal the crew to cut away. Don't you dare, Madonna snarled, slamming her hand down on his desk with such force that his coffee mug jumped and spilled across his notes. Don't you dare try to run away from this conversation now. You wanted to have this discussion. You wanted to tear me down on national television, so let's finish it. Madonna, I think you're overreacting here, Jimmy said, but his voice was shaking now. I never meant to suggest that your fans weren't important. Overreacting? Madonna's voice reached a pitch that seemed to make the studio lights flicker. Jimmy, you just spent the last 20 minutes telling me that I'm too old, too desperate, too irrelevant to continue making music. You questioned my artistic integrity, mocked my appearance, and then insulted the people who have supported me throughout my entire career. And you think I'm overreacting? I was doing my job, Jimmy said weakly. I was asking the tough questions that need to be asked. Your job? Madonna leaned down until her face was inches from his. Your job is to entertain people, Jimmy. Your job is to make them laugh, to make them feel good about themselves, to give them a break from their problems. Your job is not to destroy people for your own amusement. I wasn't trying to destroy anyone, Jimmy protested, but his words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Yes, you were, Madonna said, her voice suddenly cold and controlled. You saw an opportunity to take down someone who's achieved more than you ever will, and you took it. You thought you could humiliate me in front of millions of people and get away with it because I'm a woman, because I'm older, because you think I'm an easy target. That's not true, Jimmy said, but he couldn't meet her eyes. It is true, Madonna replied, straightening up to her full height. And you know what? The saddest part is, you're not even good at it. Your insults are pedestrian. Your observations are surface level. And your understanding of what I represent is so shallow that it's actually embarrassing. Jimmy's producer was now standing in his peripheral vision, making urgent cutting motions with his hands, but Jimmy seemed frozen in his chair, unable to respond to Madonna's verbal assault. You want to know what real power looks like, Jimmy? Madonna continued, her voice taking on an almost hypnotic quality. Real power is being able to walk away from this pathetic display of masculine insecurity with my dignity intact. Real power is knowing that tomorrow I'll still be Madonna, and you'll still be just another talk show host who thought he could take down a legend. Madonna, Jimmy tried to interrupt, but she held up a hand to silence him. I'm not finished, she said, her voice cutting through the studio like a blade. Real power is knowing that this interview will be remembered not for your clever questions or your sharp wit, but for the moment when you revealed yourself to be exactly what everyone suspected you were. A small-minded little man who gets his Kicks from trying to diminish women who are greater than he could ever hope to be. Jimmy's face had gone pale, and sweat was beading on his forehead despite the studio's air conditioning. Madonna, I think we should end this interview now. Oh, now you want to end it? Madonna's smile was sharp and predatory. Now that you've been exposed for what you really are? Now you want to cut to commercial and pretend this never happened? Yes, Jimmy said quietly, his voice barely audible over the studio's tense silence. Madonna nodded slowly, as if she had expected this response. She reached down and picked up her purse from beside the guest chair, slinging it over her shoulder with deliberate precision. Fine, she said, her voice carrying across the studio with crystal clarity. But before I go, I want everyone watching this to understand something. What you've witnessed here tonight isn't just a celebrity having a meltdown. What you've witnessed is what happens when women refuse to accept the limitations that society tries to impose on them. What you've witnessed is what happens when we fight back. She turned to face the camera directly, ignoring Jimmy completely. To everyone who has ever been told they're too old, too much, too loud, too ambitious, this is for you. Don't let anyone convince you that your time is up. Don't let anyone tell you that you need to step aside to make room for someone else. Your voice matters, your art matters, and your right to exist in whatever space you choose matters. With that, Madonna turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the studio floor with military precision. Jimmy sat frozen in his chair, his mouth hanging open as he watched her retreating figure. Just before she reached the door, Madonna turned back one final time. Oh, and Jimmy? Next time you want to interview a legend, maybe do your homework first. It might save you from looking like such a complete amateur. The studio door slammed shut behind her, leaving Jimmy alone at his desk with a studio full of shocked crew members and an audience that didn't know whether to applaud or run for the exits. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity before Jimmy finally managed to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. We'll be right back after these messages. But everyone knew that there would be no coming back from what had just happened. The Queen of Pop had just demolished a talk show host on live television, and the wreckage would be talked about for years to come. So what do you think? Did Madonna go too far? Or was Jimmy asking for everything he got? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more explosive celebrity stories that you won't believe actually happened.